These days, a lot of us use apps for our banking. Unfortunately, that's where scammers thrive. And they're getting more and more believable when trying to steal your money.
$23,000 plus.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And as if that's not bad enough, what if your bank blames you?
I called Chase again the next day. What's going on? Why is this happening? Why haven't you stopped this?
Plus, it's the end of an era, a very long era, for an Oregon congressman.
This hasn't been an easy decision.
So the big question, after 35 years, who's going to fill Peter DeFazio's seat? But first, a big update and a promise broken amid Portland's housing crisis. Here's the story. Good evening, I'm Maggie Vespa, and this is the story. As you can see, we're not starting this show in the studio. We're starting it actually at a future site, officials say, of one of Portland's safe rest villages. This is the Menlo Park and Ride at Northeast 122nd and Burnside. It's actually one of 6 village sites that was supposed to be open by the end of this year. The city made that promise, and in doing so, promised to get hundreds off of Portland streets and into warm, safe housing by midwinter. And that was key because, as we know, winters here can be dangerous, even deadly for the unhoused. And they're getting more extreme every year. Well, tonight we have an update. Portland city officials now confirm they will fail to meet their own self-imposed deadline. These villages will not open by the new year, and the hundreds who would have gotten housing in them will now endure another entire winter sleeping outside. Now they're saying it's going to be early next year.
Of course it is.
Of course it is, says Eddie. He lives in a tent on the site of a future safe rest village, the one along Southwest NATO Parkway. He says a lot of people camping here want spots in those tiny homes, and he's not surprised the city delayed their timeline, an update first reported by the Oregonian.
My big question is why? Do you know why?
We wanted to know why, too, but Housing Commissioner Dan Ryan wasn't available Wednesday, nor was anyone from his office. They did send us a statement, but before we get to that, let's review the history.
Safe rest villages are fenced, fully staffed, 24/7 managed outdoor shelters.
Back in May, city officials announced a big plan to get hundreds off the streets of Portland fast. They wanted to take COVID relief money they'd gotten from the feds, $20 million worth, and use it to open 6 safe rest villages. Each village would house roughly 50 people, so at least 300 people would be helped total. And they'd open by the new year. The task, finding empty pieces of land that were safe, available, and wouldn't cause an uproar among neighbors. That has proved difficult.
That they're not talking to anybody, they're just doing it.
So far, the city has ID'd 3 sites. There's the NATO Parkway, where we met Eddie, the former Jerome F. Sears Army Reserve Center along Southwest Multnomah Boulevard, and the Menlo Park and Ride at 122nd and Burnside. Each one was a surprise to neighbors, many of whom reached out to us.
They're just dropping it in our laps and saying, deal with it. And it's putting a hardship on everybody.
And while we've also heard from neighbors open to the idea of a village moving in nearby, the city says there's enough pushback to, in part, warrant a delay. In a statement, Commissioner Dan Ryan's office told us, quote, "Our work has been complicated by restrictions to the use of American Rescue Plan Act funds, supply chain issues, and resistance to siting safe rest villages, both from property owners and from community members." They say they're hoping to open the villages early next year, adding they are committed to doing this right. Housing advocates tell KGW they're hopeful things go smoothly from here, adding these villages are just another needed tool in addressing the larger housing crisis.
Safe rest villages are an on-ramp to permanent housing, and we need to focus our energy toward ensuring that we are getting people into that permanent housing.
And you probably know we've been following this for a while. We have so much more on this story at kgw.com. And we will, of course, stay on this and keep you posted as plans for these villages move forward. All right, let's pivot now from helping people find housing to helping people stay housed. And our own Pat Doris talked to Governor Kate Brown today about that special session that she just called to try and prevent evictions. So, Pat, what is she expecting out of this?
Well, she's hoping for $80 million. The problem is the state has already gone through about $289 million. They technically haven't done it, but by midnight tonight, they believe enough people will have signed up, about 45,000 plus, that have asked for rental assistance, that they think that federal money will all be spoken for. And the governor and others feel that there are still a lot of people, thousands more, who need this rent assistance. And so they're going to the legislature and saying, we need to have some state money to be kind of a bridge until the next bucket of federal money arrives, because it's nowhere on the horizon.
Gotcha. And we'll just remind people again, you can still apply for rent assistance until midnight tonight. That website, OregonRentalAssistance.org. And we have info at kgw.com too. Kind of pivoting a little bit, though, the governor was just in Scotland for that UN climate change conference. So what did she tell you about that?
Well, she thought it was fascinating, and she was, I think, really energized by having leaders from around the world come together and say that we're all dealing with the same thing. She thought it was sort of coastal, she said in the beginning, that we're feeling the biggest impacts from climate change. But she said a lot of people really in other places of the world, even inland, are having the same sort of catastrophic fires and winters and that sort of thing. She was also really fascinated by the wind farms off the southern coast of Scotland, and she thinks that that is a takeaway thing, that we should be building wind farms off the southern Oregon coast.
From my perspective, seeing what they are doing offshore in Scotland was an eye-opener, and we should be taking advantage of the technology that's being used in other countries and, frankly, implementing it here.
It was a really interesting conversation. We talked for 45 minutes.
Wow.
We won't have a story that long, but we'll have a lot more tomorrow.
All right, lots to pull from that, I'm sure. Pat Doris, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Switching gears, we hear about scams all the time, but over the last few weeks, several people have contacted us about a new scheme involving their online banking. Victims have lost thousands of dollars only to find out their banks are reluctant to help, despite federal law requiring that customers be reimbursed. Here's investigative reporter Kyla Boshi.
It says JP Morgan Chase banking alert. Did you attempt a Zelle payment in the
trouble started when Lisa Mae Osborne got an unexpected text message warning Chase Bank alert. Did you attempt a Zelle payment for the amount of $5,000?
And I just immediately answered no.
The Portland woman had received fraud warnings like this before, but then the phone rang and the number showed Chase Bank, although it wasn't really. A scammer claimed to be a bank rep in the fraud department and even provided account information, making his story even more believable. It's not clear where the scammer got all these details.
And they asked me if these were the last 4 digits of my social security number, and they read me those numbers. And so
the crook suggested the bank could reverse the fraudulent charges by using a mobile banking app called Zelle.
Zelle is an easy way to send and receive money with friends and family. You know.
Osborne hadn't used Zelle before, but recognized the name. It's owned by several banks, including Chase, and widely promoted. Zelle is built right into their mobile and online banking.
It wasn't a separate app on my phone. I was in the Chase online banking service.
The crook helped Osborne set up a Zelle account, then transfer money to herself, thinking it was a refund. Instead, the fraudster likely diverted those payments, although it's not clear how. The money, taken out of her 3 Chase accounts, went to the scammer.
$23,000 plus.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. It's a very big portion of my earnings in a year.
Throughout this scam, which played out over a couple days, Osborne tried to alert the real Chase Bank several times.
I called Chase again the next day. What's going on? Why is this happening? Why haven't you stopped this? Hold, please. I was on hold 2.5 hours, probably, and then the call dropped.
Similar stories have been reported around the U.S.
NBC News found people across the country who say hackers used Zelle to drain their bank accounts.
I had $3,000 get pulled out of my account.
$190.
$1,500.
A Zelle spokesperson said protecting consumers from fraud and scams is a top priority for us, and the company is warning people about this sophisticated phishing scheme.
Hi, this is Mark with your bank. I've noticed your account's been locked, and I just need your bank credentials to help you get that unlocked.
The Portland woman hoped her longtime bank, Chase, would help recover her lost money. She called and called multiple departments.
So far, Chase's response to me has been that this is my fault and that I should have known.
After weeks of fighting and filing claims, along with a separate inquiry from KGW, Chase changed its mind and agreed to help. Osborne got her money back. Federal law requires banks to reimburse you for this type of fraud. Chuck Harwood is with the Federal Trade Commission.
The important part is you need to act immediately. There is a federal law called the Electronic Funds Transfers Act, EFTA, that limits your liability when you are the victim of a scam like this and when you transfer money in an unauthorized way.
Another federal agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, confirmed to KGW that consumers who suffer unauthorized transactions are entitled to this federal protection, and banks are required to refund the stolen money. Chase wouldn't respond to our direct questions about Osborne's case, citing customer privacy. Instead, a bank spokesperson issued a written statement explaining in part, "We urge all consumers never to share their banking password or to send money to someone who says it will prevent fraud on their account. Bank employees won't call, text, or email consumers asking for this, but crooks will."
I do believe they are responsible to help their customers with this. And
Osborne worries that scammers have found a weakness and are exploiting the system.
I know, it's really
so
upsetting.
Consumers need to protect themselves. Never trust anyone who calls or texts and wants you to perform a financial transaction, even if the person appears to be from your bank. Instead, call the bank yourself. And don't give out verification codes to anyone, because you never know who's on the other end of the line.
Okay, KGW's Kyle Laboshi joining us now. So Kyle, unfortunately, this is probably going to happen again. I mean, so what should people do if they get ripped off like this?
I'd say complain as soon as possible with as much documentation as possible. That means filing a complaint with your bank or any other company involved. And speed is really important here. In most cases, by law, you've got 2 days after you learn that you've been duped to file a report. So do that right away. Also, file complaints with the FTC and State Attorney General's office. That could be Oregon, Washington, wherever you may live. They document these type of situations and sometimes can help. And really, be prepared for a fight here. Banks, they should take responsibility, but sometimes that takes some pushing.
Yeah, as you proved, for sure. All right, Kyle Laboshi, thank you.
The never-ending Newburgh School saga continues. The latest chapter, the board thinking about hiring a new superintendent with a pretty questionable history of enforcing masks in schools.
He said, would a guy like you be interested?
Oh, and apparently the board chair asked him that a full month before firing the old superintendent. When the story continues.
Welcome back, guys. Keep sending those questions and comments to the story at kgw.com or use our hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter. This week's Hey Help campaign is the KGW Great Toy Drive. We're making it so easy to give this year. If you make a cash donation online by holding your phone's camera up to the QR code, it'll take you to a donation page. Or you can go to kgw.com/toy drive. You can also drop off a toy at any IQ Credit Union, Fred Meyer, or local Toyota dealership. All right. The Newburgh School Board is on the hunt for a new president. A new superintendent. They kind of have to be. They fired the old superintendent a few weeks ago. Well, tonight we learned the board's chair has been meeting with candidates to replace said fired superintendent for months, so well before that firing took place. If you're new to the show, you know we've been covering the Newburgh School Board for a while. First, earlier this year, they passed a ban on Pride and Black Lives Matter symbols in schools, and then faced with national backlash, they then couched it as a ban on political symbols, saying they were too divisive for classrooms. In November, the board then fired Superintendent Joe Morlock. Chair Brown said it was done with no cause per the contract, but Morlock said, come on. He knew the cause. He said he was fired because he refused to enforce that political symbols ban. His reason? He says he was advised it was an illegal restriction on free speech. Now, all that in mind, the chair of the board would like everyone to know the public does not need a reason for firing the superintendent. Chair Dave Brown sent out a statement to parents and members of the community yesterday that read in part, quote, "A specific reason does not have to be given for the termination of an employment contract." Why? Due to jurisprudence, our board is not able to give all the reasons for the process and why the decision of this importance was made. Understand that this decision was made through the lens of a brighter future. Now, Brown also said the board is now starting to search for a new superintendent. Well, it turns out he actually started talking to potential candidates at least a month before firing Morlock, and one of those candidates has made headlines of his own. Mark Thielman is the superintendent of the Alsea School District. Alsea is a little community in Benton County near the coast. In August, he sent out a letter about the mask mandate in schools, telling parents they can file for disability accommodations for their kids if they don't want to wear a mask. Smash cut to October 2nd. Thielman says he met up with Newburgh Chair Dave Brown at the GOP's annual Reagan dinner, and Brown asked him if he'd be interested in taking over as superintendent of Newburgh schools. Keep in mind, Morlock, at the time, still occupied that seat.
He talked about what kind of leader I thought they should look for and what kind of process they should use to find that person. And naturally, he said, you know, would a guy like you be interested? And what I told him was, well, I don't know if I'd be the best candidate when I've got a great job here in Alsea. I said, but I think, you know, I said, I would encourage you to do an open process. And that's what he's trying to do.
Now, by the way, we should note Thielman is also running for governor of Oregon as a Republican. But, you know, for now, let's pivot back and let's keep this narrow to the Newburgh School Board, because there is a recall underway for two of the board members, Chair Dave Brown, who we've been talking about, and Vice Chair Brian Shannon. Shannon spearheaded that political symbols ban, and the organizers of the recall say they're pretty sure they'll be able to make it onto a ballot.
We are at a point where we have hundreds more signatures than we need. We are up to date with our own process of verifying, and still have way more than we need. So it wouldn't be surprising if we end up handing those in early so we can focus a lot more on the Dave Brown recall. However, we do hope to hand in the Dave Brown recall at the same time so we can get it on the same ballot.
So they say they are hoping to make it onto a ballot in January or February. We reached out several times to both Dave Brown and Brian Shannon for comment on, frankly, any or all of the things you just heard. They haven't yet responded. We'll let you know if they do. In the meantime, when the story continues, we are looking back at retiring Congressman Peter DeFazio's long career. And it requires a trip, as you can probably tell, into the KGW vault. It includes also some of his more recent work.
They're not getting this one.
Welcome back, guys. Let's talk about a big shakeup in Oregon and frankly, national politics now. Representative Peter DeFazio, the longest serving member of the House from Oregon, is retiring after 35 years. Here's part of his press conference today.
You know, I need a little more time for myself, for my health and well-being, for my wife, my family, and for the things I love in Oregon. So with that, today I am announcing that I will not run again for re-election. My district is, thanks to the legislature, now 5 or 6 points better for a Democrat. Finally, I have a district that another Democrat can win. It's no longer a Republican district. And I fully expect to endorse and work hard for the Democratic nominee and keep that seat in the Democratic column.
Now, DeFazio is the chair of the House Transportation Committee, so he's become a pretty prominent member of Congress. He's also represented Southwest Oregon, including Eugene and Roseburg, since 1987. So that in mind, let's take a trip into the KGW vault and look at what he did during his first term in Congress.
Peter DeFazio, the only freshman in the Northwest delegation, spent much of the 100th Congress scrambling to catch up to his senior colleagues. Compared to other newcomers, he had something of a head start, having once been a Capitol Hill aide to his flamboyant predecessor, Jim Weaver. Where DeFazio differs from Weaver is his instinct for playing the political game from the inside. That's why the Northwest House delegation chose DeFazio for the job of fending off White House attacks on the BPA. DeFazio was also outspoken against the administration's Persian Gulf naval operation and aid to the Nicaraguan Contras.
My position is not a penny, not ever, not an aspirin, nothing for the Contras.
All right, good to know. That was a bit of a blast from the past there. I also want to play something a little more recent. It's a video DeFazio posted on Twitter last year when a lot of people were worried, remember this, about mailboxes being removed by the Postal Service ahead of the election with all the mail-in voting. Let's play that.
They're not getting this one.
That video just tickles me. All right, no word on if those mailboxes were spared. I think we're confident that he's unchained himself, though. So now the question is, who is going to run to replace DeFazio? Well, he said today he's not choosing a successor, but you heard he'll support whoever gets the Democratic nomination. And you also heard him say earlier that his district is now more favorable for a Democrat to win, and that's thanks to this year's redistricting process, which was super smooth, as we all know. According to 538, Oregon's old 4th district was pretty much a toss-up based on current partisan divisions. DeFazio, of course, won re-election in 2020, but with less than 52% of the vote. Now, the new district includes fewer rural areas, which makes it more favorable for Democrats. And that could be a problem for Republican Alex Scarlatos, who is running for that seat after losing to DeFazio last year. Scarlatos, if you don't remember, helped stop a terror attack on a train to Paris in 2015. And he's been trying to get into politics since about that time, for the last few years. On the Democratic side, Oregon Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle just announced that she is running to fill DeFazio's seat. Hoyle was previously the state House Majority Leader representing the Eugene area. All right, keep sending in those questions and those comments to the story at kgw.com. We're going to finish the show right after this. Before we go, our whole team really wants to remind you that we love when you email us at thestory@kgw.com, even when you don't mean to send us an email and we just happen to get included. And we think that may have happened with Joanna, who sent us and her 30 closest friends a lovely Thanksgiving message last Wednesday. She wrote, "Wishing you good food, family peace, nice, happy conversations, tasty dessert, and that cozy bed at the end of the day." Joanna, thank you. Even if you didn't mean to send it to the story email, we really appreciated it. And then over the next few days, we appreciated what came next. We started getting the inevitable reply alls from her friends. Marcia said, "Thank you so much, and the same to you." And then Adelia replied, "Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone." And then this week, Margot chimed in. She wrote, "I missed the wishes. Thanks. Make note, please. I don't use this email much." Noted. Margot, copy that. We got a kick out of these reply alls. They were fantastic. So keep sending us your questions, your comments, your holiday wishes, whatever you want, to the story at kgw.com. They were seriously so cute. Our entire team loved them. You can also pick up your phone and follow us on Twitter at @thestory_KGW. With that, that's the end of the show. So let's bring in Laurel Porter now for the news at 6:30. Hey, Laurel.
Can I add my good wishes on the reply all?
Add your good wishes. I would love it. I'll forward you those emails. They're so
Gotta
cool.
love that. Thank you, Maggie. We have the first case of the Omicron variant in the U.S. The news at 6:30 starts now.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
The first known case of the Omicron COVID variant in the U.S. has been identified.